This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. Today I have a two-part show. To me, this type of research, the two individuals I'm having on my show, are as important for your investing, trading, entrepreneurial success as any one system or technique or way of living you might have. Two guests today, Dan Buettner and John Ratey. Dan has got a fantastic story. Holds world records for endurance bicycling. Rode his bike, I think, from Alaska to Argentina. Insane. Now, the cool stuff he's doing is something called Blue Zone Research. All these bicycling trips he was doing, he started to look at demographics and longevity. And this became research into what he calls blue zones. Basically, why are certain people at certain places with certain lifestyles living to be close to 100 and over 100 with active lifestyles? Now, this is interesting stuff. Second on the podcast today is John Ratey. Right in the sweet spot with where Dan goes. He's got a fantastically cool book out called Spark, the revolutionary new science of exercise in the brain. The bottom line is, exercise is the magic elixir. And John has been researching this forever. Literally everything in your life can change with exercise. So guess what? If you want to be a fantastic investor, if you want to be a fantastic trader, a fantastic entrepreneur, and your body is bad, your mind is bad, you just aren't living a good lifestyle, what are you going to do? Get to be 60, 70, 80 and die? Some fat guy, fat girl, out of shape, heart disease, cancer? The two men on my show today have insights, both extremely wise. I hope you enjoy. Hey, listen, let me jump right in. And I want to say from the beginning, not only is your subject going to be fascinating for my audience, for me personally, my great-grandmother lived to be 101. One of my grandmothers is 98 and alive, and my other grandmother made it to 93. But I don't necessarily think their quality of life is going to be in the same place as to some of the things that you've learned in your journey. But before I get into the big picture question to you, which is, how do you get to be 100 years of age? How did Dan get to be going down this subject? I mean, how going on a bike from Alaska to Argentina? Explain. I want to know.
Well, I did a series of these expeditions around the world, then across Africa, and eventually found my way into National Geographic. And I did a series of expeditions in the 90s and early 2000s that harnessed the intuitive power of an online audience to solve mysteries, mostly ancient mysteries. A lot of them were kind of archaeological mysteries, like why did the Maya civilization collapse, and did Marco Polo really go to China? And what I think I got good at, better than just about anybody else, was harnessing the wisdom of the crowd to solve mysteries. After about 16 of those, we got contacted by the Japanese government to do one in Japan. So we're actually looking for a mystery, and we stumbled upon a World Health Organization report in 2000 showing that Okinawa had the longest disability-free life expectancy in the world. And I said, aha, there's a good mystery, because I knew enough about genetics and I knew enough about the history of Okinawa to know that it was a heterogeneous population. It was a melting pot. So it had to be something, the secret had to have something to do with their culture, their lifestyle, or something incumbent in their environment. And so I had learned the tools of exploration and research from doing these previous expeditions, and now it was simply flexing those muscles in around the mystery of longevity.
you call this area in Okinawa and other areas around the world blue zones.
Yeah, so that the name emerged a little bit later. I worked with Gianni Paz and Michel Poulon. They're both on my team right now. And while zooming in on the Sardinian blue zone, we were using blue ink on a map as we were crunching the data. We just started calling the area with inside the blue circle, the blue zone. And the name seemed to resonate, and it stuck. And I just started applying it to other demographically confirmed areas where people live measurably longer or measurably longest around the world. And now we have 5 of them. That's probably all there are in the world left. But they all share the same characteristics.
Before we jump into some of those characteristics, let me ask you the kind of personal question. When you go to these areas, and I assume you've been to them all, and you go there and you talk with the people, do they realize they're special?
I've been to all the blue zones many times. They don't realize they're special. In fact, they don't even know how they got to be long-lived, which is, I think, part of the secret. You can't really go find a handful of 100-year-olds and ask them what they do and say that's the secret. You have to find what the whole culture has done for the last century, i.e. the life span of a centenarian today, and then find out what are the common traits of that culture. And then you can sort of look around for a centenarian who possesses those traits and use that personality to tell the story. But the wrong way to do centenarian research is interview a 100-year-old and reveal that 100-year-old secret.
Well, I get that. That's pretty clear from a research standpoint that you had to dig deep. But I'm just curious that when you would talk to some folks, did you ever have one conversation, just as kind of like a piece of tangential evidence, where someone just said something where you just kind of had that light bulb moment, even if they didn't necessarily know that they were sparking your interest? Was there ever that kind of personal moment, or is it more just that you digging in from a research perspective and having your research techniques and doing all the data crunching?
No, it's the thing about doing this kind of research. You cannot expect the epiphany to happen quickly, and the best insights come after you've been armpit deep in it for years. So about 6 years into the research, I've been to all the blue zones, and I was in a place called Ikaria, and I was with a 102-year-old fellow named Stamaitis Moriaitis, who had been to America, got lung cancer, and came back, and he was cured. And I'm not saying that anything magical happened. He was probably an outlier, but nevertheless, I asked him how he explains being 102 and still running a vineyard. And he thought for a moment and finally just shrugged, and he said, well, I guess I forgot to die. The key epiphany there is that in none of the blue zones, in fact, do people know how they got to be 100. They didn't start trying at age 50 to get on that diet or take that supplement or do that exercise. Longevity happens to these people. So the really key insight here, and the insight that we're really running with now, is that you don't try to modify individual behaviors. That's almost always a failure. What you want to modify is the environment so that people can forget to die. In other words, be nudged into healthier behaviors their entire lives, and then suddenly be 100 and still be sharp and active. That's
tricky, though. I mean, because these blue zones are specific locations, specific cohorts. As you said, they're very similar. So trying to expand this out, is it possible?
Well, again, they're all melting pots. So they don't possess, except for maybe Sardinia, there's nothing special in their genes. They're a mixed population like anybody else in your audience. They're tempted by the same things everybody else is tempted by. What they have is their food environment. The food that's cheapest and most accessible happens to be mostly vegetables and beans. Their kitchens are set up so they can make them easily. They have time-honored recipes to make them taste good. When they're going to each other's house, what's served is not the half an animal on a barbecue, but it's a Korean stew made out of black-eyed peas. So they're not tempted by the crap that we're tempted by relentlessly living in the developed world. Gauntlets of sodas and chips and candy bars every time you walk through a grocery store or walk through an airport or drive to the mall. It's impossible for them to be lonely. We forget that loneliness is one of the big killers. Loneliness is bad for you as a smoking habit. My team figured that they're nudged into physical activity about once every 20 minutes. So there's none of these long periods of sitting where their metabolism drops into hibernative state. So they're always kind of jump started. And that might just be in a house that doesn't have every mechanized conveniences that an American house does, or the fact that they grow their own food. So they're out for a couple hours or minutes every day, weeding or watering their plants or bringing some in, even at 100. Or that at a certain time in the day, their friend's going to come over and they're going to take a walk, or they're going to walk over to see their friend's house. So the big epiphany and the big secret is being inspired from blue zone environments and moving the portable elements of that environment to the first world. And therein lies the opportunity.
Are we programmed, though? I mean, are we ultimately programmed for longevity and we've just been messing it up?
No, we're programmed for procreation. Most mammals are programmed to live about 2.5 times the age of reproduction. So, or the age when most people become a parent. Historically, we became parents in our late teens or early 20s. And for, most of human history, life expectancy, if you got past birth, you could expect to live to 50 or so. So that's evolutionarily speaking. Now, medical science has enabled us to make it into our 70s or 80s by treating chronic diseases or infections, the diseases that used to foreshorten our lives. But nevertheless, the capacity of the human machine, even if you get rid of heart disease and cancer and diabetes and all these things that are killing the first world, you're still hit a ceiling at about age 90 or maybe 95, somewhere in there, where the body, there's just so much buildup of molecular and cellular damage from cell reproduction that the system tends to fail about then. People who make it to 100 right now, like your grandparents, they probably have a special genetic endowment. But for most of us, people under the distribution curve, one standard deviation on the side, we can make it to 90 pretty reliably, but beyond that, the system falls apart. It's a lot like buying a brand new car. I mean, we can't even figure out how to make a car last for 30 years. So how do we expect a body to last for 100, which is far more complex?
Okay, so the audience is going to have to go dig into your work if they really want to kind of get into the nitty-gritty details. And clearly, we only have so much time today. But let me jump into just a few big picture issues, and hopefully you can share some insights that maybe you saw in these blue zones across the world. Let's talk about one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest one that I personally think drives almost all behaviors, which is stress. And regardless of how that stress gets there, it's there. So what are some of the things that you observed in the blue zones that are helping these individuals to deal with the stress, which has clearly got to be helping them to reach the age of 100 and beyond?
Yes. Yeah. So they all suffer the same stresses that we do. They worry about their kids. They tend to be poor, so of course they're worrying about their money, their own health. But you notice in all these blue zones, there are sacred daily rituals that we're kind of losing in our world of connected electronics. For the Adventists, it was prayer. They'll stop before every meal and say a prayer. They'll take the whole day off on Saturday to create a sanctuary in time. So all the pressures of work and social schedule where the kids need to be driven, we're not doing it for 24 hours. We're just focusing on our families and our gods and really our physical fitness. They take a nature walk. So that's a powerful vehicle. The Okinawans, spend a little bit of time every day in ancestor veneration. So they'll spend some time remembering where they came from, relinquishing up some of the stresses of the day, taking a nap like the Icarians and the Costa Ricans. Almost every day, mid-afternoon, whatever work they're doing, they'll stop and get in a hammock or they'll lay down and they'll take a half an hour nap, which is a proven stress reduction. Your biochemicals completely turn around if you can manage to take a little nap, and your chances of a heart attack drop by about a third if you can get in that habit. And then I'm become a big believer in happy hour, which I know sounds flippant, but when you think about it, you're working hard all day long, and your testosterone or your hormones may be elevated because you're executing trades, or you're negotiating, or you're under stress from your boss or your client or whatever it is. But all of a sudden you meet 3 or 4 of your friends at a bar, there's some music, have a cocktail or a glass of wine. You take you can talk about your pressures, or you can talk about something else. And that stress and the ensuing inflammation that stress creates, which is so bad for our bodies, literally dissipates. The hormones, the cortisol levels drop. It's something a lot of us completely overlook because we'll get more work done, or we got to rush home to our families. But I think putting that sort of punctuation is really important.
You bring up Japan, and I was just in Tokyo and Kyoto recently, first time in Kyoto, and I spent a day by myself just going to all the temples. And I don't necessarily know what was happening to me physically, but there's no doubt to go to some places that they just do something to you. They bring you down a notch. And I imagine, I guess the question I'm going with there, was there any aspect of the blue zones were not near major cities, they weren't a part of big cities, were they, or were they not?
In Okinawa, there's a big city there, Naha. I mean, they're near medium-sized cities. The blue zone in America, Loma Linda, California, is very close to Los Angeles, right on the edge of Los Angeles. So they're not completely insulated from that, but I think they insulate their neighborhood. But to your point about taking this time to go to temples, I think these sacred places, to a certain extent, are engineered to slow us down and to force sort of inward thinking. And I think just the act of we know that people who belong to a faith and show up live 4 to 14 years longer. And we don't know if it's because some intervention of a God, or if just because they did what you did, Michael, and went to a silent place and reflected for a while. Maybe put some of the things that are stressing us out in perspective to a bigger picture, and all of a sudden they diminish. So I think just the act of doing what you did on a regular basis, personally, and what I observed in blue zones, is one of the ingredients to the longevity recipe.
Exercise. And so here I am. I'm in Saigon right now, and in the last 24 hours, I will have gone to a yoga class that just about killed me, a CrossFit class. And yes, I'm in decent shape for a 40-something male, but that's not the kind of exercise that you were observing as part of the blue zones, was it? No. In fact, there's a pretty strong argument against working out too hard, too often. You look among the Sardinians, the longest lived men in the world live in the highlands of Sardinia. And the farmers there actually don't live any longer than the Italian average. And you look at the life of a farmer, and they tend to work really hard during the growing season. So imagine about a 13-hour workout in the fields. And then they sit around for the rest of the rest of their year is pretty low intensity. On the other hand, the shepherds who are reaching age 100 at rates 10 or 12 times higher than American males are, they don't work all that hard. I actually spent a week with one of them. They sort of wake up when the sun's warm. They take a 1 or 2 mile walk as they pasture their animals. They eat lunch. They take a nap. They walk another mile or two, and they call it a day. And they go drink wine in the village. But it is constant, daily, low intensity physical activity. And you see these same patterns wherever you go. These guys aren't
sitting in the office for 8 hours and trying to make up with it in 4 hours in the gym. I really think the answer is engineering low-intensity physical activity back into our lives.
It's definitely counterintuitive to what we have been fed in the last 30, 40, 50 years.
What we've been fed is driven by an industrial economy that requires people to show up at work at 8 and work till 5 or beyond. So we've tried to make physical activity conform to the workday rather than conform to the way we evolved as humans. And I always take pay special attention to what humans have done most of their existence as a way to inform what we ought to be doing now, both in physical activity, but also in what we eat. And I think therein lies a lot of wisdom for us to harness today.
Let me go into one more area with you today, Dan, which is relationships and even maybe more specifically, sex. And I saw the one line in your work that in Okinawa, we have folks often dying in their sleep over the age of 100, often after sex. Was that accurate?
Yeah, so I don't think the line was often. I think it was occasionally, and indeed it was very occasionally. We did see a few centenarians who were still sexually active, but the most convincing cohort was in Greece, where we were finding a cohort of men over age 90, half of whom were still having sex. They reported having sex with duration and achievement, to put it in the parlance of academia. But that's the ability to have sex is really a bellwether to your overall health. There's no reason that has to go away as long as you keep yourself healthy.
Well, that's the key thing there, though. And I think if we look at America with obesity rates, I mean, I don't know for sure. I've not done the research, but I can only guess that people that are frankly obese probably have less of that drive, and maybe even physically they're in discomfort to even attempt to go there. So I can see how there's limiting reasons why sex might even be possible for some.
Yeah, and they're hormonally disinclined, and the plumbing doesn't work. If your cardiovascular system's in poor health, that is consistent throughout the body. So you don't have the capacity. But I think more important than focusing on sex, I know it's fun to focus on sex, but really relationships are huge. And these centenarians, most of them either learned how to be likable or they were likable from the beginning. And they had so they invested in a group of really dependable friends who also depended on them. And they invested in the family.
Their whole lives, that group of friends, right?
In Okinawa, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But you do have to find that group of 4 or 5 friends, we call it a moai, that you can really have meaningful conversations with, who you've known long enough that they'll care about you on a bad day, and that you actually have face-to-face contact with regularly. And that's probably worth 8 or 9 years of life expectancy over somebody who's lonely watching 6 hours of TV a day and hoping to make up for their social deficit on Facebook.
I love your rather sly style of just kind of zinging us on all the stuff that we do crazy.
But Skype is fine, by the way.
Well, it's easy. It's easy for this kind of stuff. Hey, listen, so where is the best place? People clearly, if they're going to want to dig in for more information, we can only touch on so much in 30 minutes. Where's the best place for people to go to check you out, more information, find out what you're up to right now? Where should they go?
Yeah, bluezones.com, or we have a Facebook fan page or Twitter at Blue Zones. And then I wrote this book, Blue Zones, Lessons on Living Longer from the World, People Who Live the Longest. I'm also leading projects in now 20 cities throughout America, including Fort Worth and Los Angeles and Honolulu, that have adopted a Blue Zones template for their entire public health initiative. So it's taken off.
Hey, how did you end up driving? You rode your bike from Alaska to Argentina?
Yeah, it was all downhill, though.
Oh, yeah. That's a heck of a run. I give you props for it. I'm sure if we talked longer, I would find out something very interesting about you, but we don't have time today. So,
well, it was a delight talking with you, Michael, and thank you for connecting.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
Live large.
Take care. Fantastic insights from Dan. Just great stuff. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode with John. As a man in my 40s, I love the fact that I've now met someone, you, who has put the science behind my intuition. My intuition being, I can't feel any better. I can't be more alert and more creative than when I'm post-yoga or post a run. I mean, I know there's nothing in my life that does more for my brain than exercise. Now, I don't have the science behind it. I've not done that work, but you have. And so that's the first part of my setup here. And the second part is I think there's a lot of people in the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years that have said to themselves, who cares if I'm a big fat guy? You know, as long as I'm smart enough to make the money and I'll get the girls and all this kind of stuff. But your work is clearly right there saying that exercise is the magic elixir for the brain if there ever was one.
Right. No, I think you're right. And I think that's what we have come to know. I mean, everybody sort of knew this. Hippocrates knew it back 300 years BC and wrote about it as the way to treat depression and the way to keep your life in order. Now that we're looking at well-being a little more, I mean, exercise is one of the primary ways of improving our sense of well-being. See, to your point, the big revolution since 1988 really has been the revolution in neuroscience, us really beginning to really see that our brain grows and that we can mold it and shape it by what we do and how the environment impacts on it and all that. And nothing does it quite so well as what exercise does. And this is what has been a phenomenal increase in the effect of exercise on all kinds of brain and personality attributes. So that it's really been a huge introduction to, and I mean that, we're just beginning to plumb the depths of it, so to speak, and get down to the genes and get down to those genes that are called upon to act by exercise. And we know so much now, and it's coming from all over the world. Everywhere, almost every country, even a paper recently from Iran looking at exercise and its effect on women's menstrual cycle and their mood and their anger and all that. Those that do dance versus those that don't, and it's everywhere they look, there's a positive effect. And now we have the science, and this has really propelled what do I call the revolution in science about exercise in the brain.
And we're talking about exercise. It's from motivation to memory to attention. I mean, exercise is turning on all of these things.
Right, and recently creativity. I mean, we've known this, and there have been studies done showing that exercise improves your creativity. Now, great study out of Stanford just in the past month and a half showed that if you're walking, you are much more creative than when you're sitting, or if you're walking and then immediately afterwards are tested, your creativity scores go up. So we're meant to move, and I think for us to take advantage of the world and be more, quote, adaptive, which means that we can learn and use things in the world better, the more we exercise, the better we are.
Let me jump into something, John, that's a very specific issue, particular pharmaceutical medications. And obviously, we're not trying to make a blanket case here, but I'm wondering when, you start to make the case for exercise and all the benefits of our brains, of our minds. These prescription drugs in the families of Zoloft, Prozac, etc. I mean, are we close to being able to say that for many, many people under the bell curve of using those types of products, that exercise would do better for them?
Oh, I think we've been there for a while. You know, again, back to Hippocrates, his prescription for a bad mood was to go for a long walk, and if it didn't work, then go for another walk. Just keep moving. And I think, you know, the root word of movement is the same word for motivation and emotion. And I think that's not just the happenstance. I think there's a reason why they share the same root, and I do think they do. That movement leads to us moving forward, moving in any direction, but hopefully in a direction that we choose, as well as guiding us in our emotional life. Now, lots of studies have been done showing that exercise is as good as our antidepressants or anti-anxiety agents in certain individuals. In people who have mild to moderate depression, for instance, a number of studies show that introducing exercise 3 or 4 times a week for a pretty good clip, 40 minutes or so, but getting the people moving, not just walking, getting them to the point where they're sweating, moderate exercise. If you do that, you're getting the same effect as you would the drugs you mentioned, Zoloft and Prozac and all those others. Similarly, doing exercise of all sorts, and you mentioned yoga to begin with, balance and coordination training as well as aerobic exercise has a big effect, and it's been shown now on the brain to help our attention system, to help our ability to take in information, to read better, to remember, certainly. And in my book, Spark, I spend a lot of time talking about how exactly exercise works to make the brain work better.
You know, John, am I going off on a tangent here if I say that we naturally want exercise? And I sometimes have seen this over the years with groups of kids, and it's on my own personal experiment. But if there's ever a group of kids around, I like to make them run, do races. I don't care. And if their parents are standing around, they have no idea who this crazy man is that's telling all these kids to run. But you know, kids of all ages, let's say you get 20 kids in a group, 6 to 10 years old, and you make them start running sprints. They all love it. They just love it. And there's so many things going on with exercise. And I just think maybe with the environmental issues that we've faced in the last 20, 30, 40 years, from fast food to sitting, you name it, has really just taken away from us that natural high of exercise, hasn't it?
Right. No, we've our kids are being cheated out of the all important joy that comes from movement, the joy of movement. That was a big book, 30, 40 years ago. But it's so true. There is joy in movement.
So the human mind, we often don't think about the human mind as a flexible muscle. You know, it's use it or lose it though, isn't it? I mean, it's not unlike when I have to go work my body in yoga. You know, I got to keep doing that to keep that strength. It's the same thing in our mind, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think even more so. That's a big principle in neuroscience, and that is use it or lose it, much like it is with your muscles. So I think the big move in the past 15 years, 20 years or so in neuroscience is looking at our brain as a muscle. Wonderful papers have been written just sort of talking about that. The more we use our brain, the better it gets, the stronger, the more vibrant, the more protected against the ravages of age and injury and all that. If we are exercising, we are using more of our brain than in any other activity. There's a TV show just being advertised now about somebody using more than 10% of their brain. Well, we always use all of our brain. It's just sort of a catchword, something that's in old wives' tales, that we only use a small part of our brain, but we use a lot of our brain, and we use more of it for more intense time that when we're exercising, because the brain was constructed, really, the human brain was constructed to help us be better movers, better actors in the environment so that we could become the evolutionary victors that we are. And I think this is so key to sort of understand why movement is so crucial to us. We come out of the womb expecting to, one, play, then and with that move, and with that move a lot, because when we were hunter-gatherers, when most of our brains evolved, over 500,000 years, we were moving all the time. Genes haven't changed all that much, so certainly their genes are responsive to the environment, but our basic prescription is pretty much the same as it was 10,000 years ago. And 10,000 years ago, we were hunter-gatherers, and we were moving 10 to 14 miles a day. And we were swimming, we were climbing, we were sprinting, we were foraging, we were walking from place to place, we were lifting, we were doing all the things that we pay to do now in the gymnasium or taking a yoga class. We had to be spry. We had to be quick. We had to be balanced, and did it all the time. So our brains were constantly being used and constantly fed. And as you suggested, in the past 40 years, let's say, we're not doing that, especially since the digital revolution took over our brains and our lives. Most of it very good, but some of it leading to our problems in healthcare.
John, let me ask you, I think it's pretty obvious for people that exercise, heart disease related, you're making the case, you're saying, hey, depression is right there. One of the ailments that's really seen massive increases, and I don't know the exact time frame, but let's say the last few decades, is autism. And I saw it mentioned in your work. Where does autism fit in this scenario from your perspective?
Well, there's no question there's a high increase, a direct correlation in countries that are first-tier countries, increasing incidence of autism. We're not sure why, but I'm working with a whole group of researchers looking at, and my particular slant is looking at the effect of exercise on our autistic kids, and finding that it has a much better effect than the usual medicines that these kids are placed on that are very, very impaired. What it does, it improves attention, improves sociability, decreases what's called disruptive behavior, today's parlance, aggression, self-abuse, running away. All those activities are reduced if you have these kids moving and moving a lot.
We're bouncing back and forth today between two of your books, Go Wild and Sparks. So the audience will have to read both, but we're kind of covering topics in both today. Let me let you go a little more science on me. BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor. I could almost feel your love for the concept for it in your writing.
Exactly. It's one of those things that I discovered back in 1995 that we knew about, who we had learned about 5 years before. Brain-derived neurotropic factor is called brain fertilizer. I named it Miracle Grow for the brain to sort of give it common parlance. And it really is that. It's really brain fertilizer. And BDNF has been the sweetheart of many biotech firms trying to figure out ways of increasing the amount of BDNF by using medicine, of course. Learn about it. Everybody looks at it in terms of diet, in terms of exercise, but there's nothing that increases the concentration of BDNF like physical exercise.
Exercise wins. Nothing increases it like exercise.
Right. Nothing increases it like exercise. And the reason for that is that when you're using your brain cells, when you're clicking away, when you're firing your 100 billion brain cells that we have, you are having a feedback loop that makes more of this fertilizer. Back again to the use it or lose it. So it's like the muscle. When you exercise your muscle, you're building your muscle fibers. You're breaking them and then rebuilding them, and they grow more, and you get more blood flow there, and you get more glucose coming into your muscles. The same way with your brain. And the grand leader of all the factors, and there are many, many factors that are involved for the brain, but the leader of all the factors that are positive in terms of growth, in terms of reliability, in terms of having our brains work optimally, is BDNF. And it is made every time our brain cells fire, which is really something we've learned only in the past 3 or 4 years. But we make more of it when we exercise than in any other activity because we use more brain cells in exercise than we do in any other known activity or drug or anything that we can do.
My audience, I'm sure there's many people in my audience that probably have children who have, for an assortment of reasons, perhaps first started at a school system by a hopefully well-intentioned teacher who said, you know, your little boy is just a little too hyper. He's a little too active. We think he might have ADHD. We think you should put him on these pharmaceuticals. What in blazes has happened in the last 20, 30, 40 years that little boys are being made to be passive little drug cocktailed out zombie patients at first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade? What happened to us, John?
Well, we evolved. Our education system evolved to really say, well, the goal is to sit in your seats, pay attention, and follow rules. The old German philosophy that was, established in the 1800s. I don't think they're fully behind that anymore. But the whole idea of sitting there taking in information and spewing it back. I mean, and especially with the younger kids. Now it's evolving a bit, but we still demand that everybody participate and not interfere with other people. And boys are much more likely than girls to cause trouble. So they get identified. Although the girls are right there now, being identified as being some children that can't sit still or can't keep their minds on the topic. All that is happening as well, but much more so with our boys. So I think there's been a change in culture, a change in the way we look at things and the way we do things, and a much more sedentary, stay in your seat all day long, pay attention, take in, drill, baby, drill, all those things that the little boys especially rebel against, and not move around. And if you're out of your chair, then you're bad. And then you have to go see the principal and all of that.
Or you have to take drugs.
Oh yeah, well that's the eventual sequelae. That happens later, but yes, you take these cocktails, and a lot of times we know that boys mature, their brains mature later than girls. A lot of them grow out of their hyperactivity. Some of them don't. The drugs can be amazing for some and more problematic for others. But if they were exercising 3 or 4 times a day, if they were exercising first thing in the morning, then they had a very strenuous recess. Then they had recess again after lunch. Then you would see a drop in these complaints. The problem is at recess today, kids get on their iPhones and are texting, their whatever phones, and they're playing video games, or they're checking their Facebook pages. So that these are just accoutrements of the modern age that really subvert even if they do have recess, and a lot of schools have eliminated recess, they've certainly cut way back on the importance of physical education and movement in the classroom because ill-advisedly, and that's happening everywhere, all over the world.
You and I are both old enough, and you're older than I, but we're both old enough to have an experience before a lot of these things changed. And I'm always going to be thankful that I'm going to have the experience to be someone that was in college and whatnot, not using the internet. So I didn't have that growing up. It wasn't until my, frankly, 20s and 30s. But what do you think is going to happen to these groups? And I'm just asking you for your kind of forward-looking thinking. So many young kids today, they're not getting these exercise experiences. And maybe slowly but surely things will get turned around. But it doesn't look like such a good situation where the only exercise they're getting, as you kind of make the point, is maybe their thumbs on a video game. And I'm not trying to be like a mean guy, but at some point in time, it seems like the wisdom of the society at some point in time would wake up and say, what are we doing?
Right. Well, there's no master planner. That's the thing that everybody misses. There's no master planner. There's no forward thinking. Everything looks at 3-month intervals for the stock market, or for a 6-month interval at most for politicians because they're up for election next month or whenever. And this then drives them to only look at short-term goals. The long term is forgotten. Oh, the short term is get those test scores up, no matter what it means, Long term, is that better for society? Is that a good idea? Is that who we should reward? Does that really work? When all the studies that we've done and come in show that if you really want to raise test scores, you get these kids exercising. That's what raises test scores most dramatically. And sure, you need time to learn, but you have a ready mind, you have a ready student, you have a ready brain, because you change the brain so that when you're trying to learn, your brain cells are in the perfect situation because of the effect of exercise to grow and change. And that's how the brain cells themselves have to grow for us to learn anything. So the best preparation is activity, exercise, play when you're younger, especially to run around and chase each other, and like you say, sprinting games or running games or jump rope or dance or foursquare or hopscotch. Any of the old games that we used to play were not devised to help our brains work better, but in fact that's what they did, and that's what they do, and they laugh, and they love it, and they don't feel bad about it. They're going for it, and they want it. So this is what we have to relearn and reintroduce this to our children if we're going to have a future that's different. And I'm not so hopeful that this is something that people are going to give way to, because people are saying, no, drill, baby, drill. Let's get those test scores up. Let's keep them at the top of the pile. But who's starting to listen to my message in a very big way is Asia. I'm going to China next week to start this mission in mainland China, but I've had a big influence in Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, where they have taken this to heart and have made changes in their academic system to reintroduce exercise and play into their kids' lives, because they used to be there in these countries, in China specifically, but they've been taken out because they want to compete and they will have to get into the best schools in the world. And to do that, the thought is put those kids in their seat, jam them full of information so they can do the best on tests.
Well, John, I'm in Saigon tonight in Vietnam, and it's sad that I've been in Asia for the last year and a half. It's sad to see the numbers of American fast food restaurants literally popping up by the week. So not only do they perhaps have the exercise programs that have been shot down, but all the young kids today, if they want to have a birthday party, it's like, let's go to KFC, and all that great food you might have in Vietnam with all the vegetables and all the good stuff. They want the American export.
Oh yeah, no, I think we've changed the world in so many different ways, and in many ways, so many bad ways. But it's not just the American fast food. It's all these countries. The kids are growing up with the idea of fast food, and that means fast lunches, even if it's their own foods, usually fried, usually full of carbohydrates that aren't. I'm not talking vegetables, but whether it's American made or American modeled, fast food industry is obviously has a big part to play in the tremendous growth of overweight and obese children around the world, and again, especially in Asia, which is, there was a study came out just a few months ago. The Chinese said that 80% of their health problems are because of lifestyle changes, which mean not just the pollution and all, although that's a biggie, but the diet, the lack of movement, the lack of exercise, and it's particularly imperiling the kids because they're the ones that are growing up, and the obesity rates are skyrocketing in countries you never would have thought this was a problem, like India, China, Taiwan, and South Korea, where the fast food revolution, the sedentary lives that these kids generally tend to lead are really leading to problems. And we know that the fitter you are, the smarter you are. And that's been shown again and again in studies, in large studies, in small studies, in every study that's done. The Mayo Clinic reviewed 1,600 studies 2 years ago, looking at the effect of exercise on broadly called cognition, learning, memory, performing your brain performance. And it was overwhelmingly positive that the more you exercise, the better your brain worked, the more cognition, the better scores you had, and that they lasted. So there's little question that this has that kind of effect on our ability to learn and remember and to perform academically and on the job, and yet we poo-poo it.
Yep.
We think, oh, that's just for the body, or that's just for the jocks, or just for the World Cup players, or whatever's gonna how people put it down. But it's everywhere.
You can only hope to influence some, and I'm sure you are. I mean, I know for me, like I said, I had the intuition, but to see your work, I'm kind of like, okay, there's the science. That's enough for me for the rest of my life. Boom, that's the deal. And so, you've got one convert in me, and I'm sure you have many more, of course. Hey, John, your new book is Go Wild. The book before that was called Spark. Where is the best place? They can find those on Amazon, Go Wild and Spark. The best place, though, to find more information about you online?
No, the best place is to go to johnrady.com.
I appreciate you taking the time today, John. I mean, I really love where you're going with this. And it's one of those like aha moments you have in your lifetime where somebody comes out with the medical research, the science, and says, there's nothing better for your mind than exercise. And I just think that's a brilliant piece of insight. And I'm fortunate to have had you on for you to say it to me in person today. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you to your audience for listening.
Thanks, John. Take care. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.